This session is going to cover how to make a check run for open accounts payable items. Now, this is part of the accounts payable module. Normally, you will decide which items to pay by either looking at an invoice register or an aging report or an items due to be paid report. You can make the decision about how you're going to decide which items to pay. But the ultimate goal would be to get to the AP.P1 where we create pre-checks records. And this helps us choose the items we want to pay. We open this process. I'm going to run it to preview on screen so we'll be able to see the results of what I do. But obviously, you can pick to send to a printer if you want to get a hard copy or whatever it is you're doing here. We're going to enter the company code. It's going to default to the cash account number to be used. The check date's going to be asked for. We can force a discount if we want to override if we're past our 10 days, but we still want to take the discount. We're going to exclude credit card invoices. And are we doing only ACH items in this run? Are we doing only non-ACH items in this run? And are we doing all vendors in this run? I'm going to pick non-ACH, which means I'm actually going to run a check run and I'm going to print some checks. At this point, I have a couple decisions to make. Batch creation allows me to put in a cutoff date and says just flat pay everything due to be paid through a cutoff date. So if I put 6/30/24 in here, it will pick up everything due to be paid through 6/30 and select those items without me choosing any individual ones. Over here on the right, however, I can either choose items for a vendor or all vendors, or I can hand enter accounts payable items if there's only 2 or 3 I'm paying. If I pick up the all vendors, I click this button. It opens up everything due to be paid. I can say I want to pay that one, I want to pay that one, and I want to pay these 2. And I can highlight. I'm doing that by holding down the control key and selecting items. I'm going to turn off. Well, I'm going to leave that one there because I didn't mean to pick up this one, but I'll show you how you can get rid of it once you've selected it. You say OK, and it shows you all the items you chose here on the bottom. At this point, I can say I didn't mean to pick this one up. I didn't want to include this credit or debit memo, actually. So I would go up to File, the Edit, and say Delete Row, and it gets rid of that one, and everything else is left behind. So it gives me my total amount paid. It shows me all the invoices. I can still make some tweaks here. I can include more items. I can remove any of these. I could reduce payment amount. If I'm paying half of this, I can change this to 5,000. And when I get it all set the way I want, I run process, and this generates what we call pre-checks records. We don't create a check record yet because we created a preliminary pre-checks file, and we do that for one specific reason, and that's printer's jam. You're going to run 98 checks through a check run process, and the first 95 print and the last 3 jam. We give you a chance to post those first 95 and reprint the last 3 and not have to redo the whole 98 run. So that's the whole reason for this. So it shows you a recap. This is just to let you know you're going to have 3 records, and the total is going to be $10,339. And the other important thing on this is this check run number 928. It's going to tell you when you want to print the checks and when you want to post the checks. It's going to ask you which run number do you want to post. If you only have one run number, it'll default it. But if you have multiple run numbers open, it'll want to know which one you're posting or printing. So I'm going to close these out because this is all done. And at this point, I want to print the checks. So I'm going to go to the check processes in the output. I can print the checks. The checks F1 is for dot matrix continuous form checks. Checks F2 is for pre-printed laser checks. And checks.F5 is for blank stock laser checks where you're using the special magnetic cartridge in a printer and you're printing the text and the logos and the maker code at the bottom of the check form. Most common, however, is checks.F2, and that's what we'll choose. We're going to run this output. I'm going to run it to preview on screen so we can see what the output looks like. I'm sorry, PDF viewer. And then I would say which check run I want. Because I only have one check run active, it knows which check to use. And then it says, what's my starting check number? I put the checks in the printer. I've got to take note of which check number is the first one to print. So it's 9877 is the first check, and I'll put that in, and that's all. I'm ready to go. On the right here, you use one or the other. If you're running a whole check run, you run this. If you're reprinting an existing check, let's say that what I mentioned before was there were 98 checks in the first, I only put 95 in the printer and the last 3 printed on plain paper. This gives you the ability to reprint those last 3 without having to reprint all 98 checks. So I run this process and it prints the forms. At this point, our format is stub, and check at the bottom on each page. So you can see how this would print on a pre-printed form. 1, 2, and 3 items I selected to be paid in this check run number. That's all there is to it. It prints, I review those, I sign those, I get them ready to go. And when everything's ready to go, I can run the process and I can post those checks. This posting removes them from the pre-checks file, puts them into the check register, and updates the accounts payable items as paid. So now I print this and it shows me the items, and that's all there is to it. And that is the end. My checks are posted, my checks are printed. If I wanted to run a report of my check register to verify that, I can run a check register report and look and see what happened today. And I run that process and I can see I actually made 1 check run before, and then I ran a second check run afterwards. So they combined in the same check run number. Sorry, the same check register, sorry. And that's the end of the check register process. Thank you very much.